Welcome to The Secret Place with Steffa, Bennett, devotions for hungry hearts and searching souls. Hi there, this is Steffa from The Secret Place. I'm reading a book called Will and Spirit by Gerald May, MD. Dr. May died a few years ago. He was the author of Addiction and Grace and that wonderful book that I told you about. What was that book? The Awakened Soul. This is a short reading about fear and how to, I don't want to say how to overcome it, but really wrestling down fear and learning to deal with it as it really is. It's not this big monster. It's just like a toothless lion. So May says this, Dr. May says this: there's no way to avoid fear, great fear, in the course of spiritual growth. The only saving quality is that in an atmosphere of willingness, the experiences of love and fear come together. Where terror is encountered, the sense of the divine love is always available. If it were not for this, our spiritual journeys would invariably be short-lived and abortive. In reality, many people do experience very short-lived journeys of faith because they approach spirituality with a willful mind and are unable to appreciate the nature of divine love. In such cases, a few small tastes of spiritual fear are sufficient to convince them that their time and energy are far better spent on other things. Is that you? Or do you know someone like that who maybe started out in faith or took a chance on, maybe I should start this walk of faith. Maybe my answer in living a life of more meaning and purpose is a life where I include faith in God, where I acknowledge God and I include Him in my life. But then something happened, or you drifted away after a very short time, or it never seemed to come together like some people's spiritual journeys. Well, if that's you or that's someone you know, that's a great deal of people, many, many people. I love the way May says this: there's no way to avoid fear, great fear, in the course of spiritual growth. The only saving quality is that there's willingness. In the atmosphere of willingness, the experiences of love and fear come together. That is so powerful. In the atmosphere of willingness. Oh man, I remember when I was 17 and I wrote a poem. It was the first poem I wrote that wasn't dark. That was as a result of coming to a greater faith and deciding to follow Jesus Christ and walk with God through Him. And it was called Willingness. And it occurred to me that, like, giving myself to Him in such a way, like not just inviting God into my life and saying, I know you're there now, or I believe that you're there now, and let's walk together. Thank you for letting me walk with you. It was an understanding, as I started reading the Bible, it was an understanding that there needed to be a willingness to let God shape me and remold me. I remember one of the lines was, shaping me, remolding me, chipping away all the old battlegrounds of self against self. That sounds scary because, think of a statue like a piece of a work of art where a sculptor, capital S, is chipping away at chunks of that stone. And I remember feeling that way, like, if the Lord is going to transform me or change me into being the kind of person that is I wasn't thinking holy, but just more, acceptable, more, a pleasure to be around, or positive, or someone who would at least have a positive outlook, and love people better and be less self-centered. Those were the things that I wanted when I was embarking on my spiritual journey. I wasn't thinking about, everyone probably thinks about different things. I wasn't thinking like, I really want to know I'll go to heaven, and I really want to know that God won't fry me in the frying pan of hell. And I don't know, I wasn't raised with a heavy view of like a menacing God. My mother raised me in such a way of just, God, of knowing God, that God is there. But I wanted more meaning in my life. And I knew that it wasn't found in philosophy. I was in the midst of taking some philosophy courses as an undergrad. And man, it was clear from like day one that more meaning in life wasn't going to be found. Or the things I wanted, the goods that I wanted. I wanted to be able to love more, right? I wanted to be able to be at more peace. I wasn't going to find that through philosophy. I was in a psychology class. I wasn't going to find that through psychology. But as I started reading the Bible, I saw like words come to life for me. And I started realizing that God would do this. This would be part of my spiritual journey, that the Holy Spirit of God would do this within me. But I had to be willing. And so that willingness, this word from Gerald May, is so significant to me, because a willingness has to be there to say, yes, okay, do with me what you think is right. I'll follow you. I'll follow you, Lord. Give me the grace and strength to follow you. You know, and as we give him those parts of our heart that he is then revealing to us, you know, how about this? How about that? How about this, child? You know, and we start to see we can surrender more, we can give more, we can be more willing. It can become very scary. We start to see the fear rather than the love. And I think that that's what he's talking about, that sometimes we start out in a spiritual journey, or we know someone who started out on a spiritual journey, and before they even had a chance to grow in grace, in the groaning or in the fear of what might be lost, they decide to stop. They're like, no, this is too much for me. No, I can't go there. No. What little I have, I need to hold on for myself. You know, that's why I love those stories in the Bible, old and new, where, you know, is it Elijah? Oh, I should know my Bible better. Elijah asked the widow to make him a wheat cake or a cake of grain, and all she had was like a little flask of oil and enough for one cake, and yet she gave it. She gave it to the man of God. She didn't hold on to it. She might have felt like holding on to it. And how about those children with the fish for lunch, the loaves of bread and the fish, just the little bit, a couple of fish and a couple of loaves of bread, and Jesus was gathered around the 5,000, and he told his disciples, well, gather up what's here. And the disciples said, well, look what we have. We can carry it in 2 hands. We just have a few fish and some loaves of bread. People gave them up to the disciples. Can you imagine giving up? You're going to be 24 hours walking back home, there for who knows how long on the mountainside listening to this wonderful teacher, and you've got like a fish to last you for the day, or a half a fish, and you're giving it up. Tell me that's not scary. Come on, let's get real. Everyday stuff, we need to survive. We don't want to give up our stuff. We may want to, but we're afraid to. But once we do, and we open up our hands, you know what that's called? That's called worship. That's called worship. Paul calls us a living sacrifice when we do that. When we open up our hands, say, okay, here it is. It's not much. It's all I've got. And I remember when I did that with the Lord, it wasn't the only time I've had to do that. There's been times throughout the years, all these 40 plus years, where I've had to say again, really? You want that? Really, you want that? But that's something that's good, and that's something that, doesn't that honor you? All that to say, you know, because I don't want to bore you with all my little stories. I've got them, you know it. But all that to say is that there are 1,000 reasons that keep us from being transformed and finding our lives just beautified and made meaningful by the Spirit of the living God. There's 1,000 of reasons why we don't. 1,000 of fearful reasons why we would hang back. But there's one very good overarching reason why we should open our hands and say, here it is, Lord. It's because his love overcomes fear. His love surpasses fear. His love decimates fear. His love is grand and beautiful, and it's worth it. because no one will love you like the Lord loves you. No one will love me that way. We might profess it. A friend might say, I love you. You're always going to be my very best friend, my closest friend. There'll be times when that friend disappoints you. You may say to your husband or your wife, I will never leave you. I make this vow before God and man. And then they go off cheating. Lousy things happen to us. Lousy things happen to people. But God's love is above it and over it all. So grasp onto the love. Let's let go of the things that bind us in fear and offer up ourselves as a living sacrifice. God bless you today. This has been Steffa from The Secret Place. Have a really great weekend.
Breathe,
Bye.
listen, and receive. Take a moment to soak it all in. Until next time.